Hey guys, so I know we're all excited to listen to episode 1, but episode 1 does come with a trigger warning. We will be discussing different forms of abuse. We will be discussing abusers, why we haven't left the abuser, and different forms of abuse that could be triggering to some to listen to. If you're not ready to hear a conversation like this, please speak with somebody, whether it be a family member, a friend, or a therapist. But I hope this episode finds you well, and please proceed with caution. Thanks! Hi guys, it's Juliana. So today is the first episode of the Girlyhub podcast, a variety show where we talk about everything without draining your social battery. This should feel like a FaceTime with your bestie or getting to know somebody new. So today's first episode is something we're probably all familiar with, whether it's a family member, a friend's partner, a friend's family member, our own partners, an ex, or a friend. And that is, am I in an abusive relationship or have I been in one? And to start off, I think we can all agree that if we're asking ourselves that, we might probably be in one. But the hardest part is accepting and finding the flags, and then accepting that they're red and not green. So in episode 1, we're talking about, am I in an abusive relationship? And I'm going to go over micro patterns, macro patterns, what I consider the layers of the onion, which are the 7 layers of different layers of abuse and forms of abuse that you may have gone through or can recognize. Why didn't and can't you leave? And reflective questions if you feel like you may be in an abusive relationship. So to start, am I in an abusive relationship? If you already clicked on this podcast, you probably have experience and you may have been in one or was the abuser. But here are signs that we can recognize. So I'm going to compare the abuse to an onion. This is how we can cut through the layers, and unfortunately sometimes when we cut through the layers we're going to cry. Things like this can be hard to go over, and with every layer we go through, the deeper we go, the more you might feel hurt and sensitive to cry. And that's okay, because the validation is there and you have it, and we're also going to find ways for you to find it within yourself without needing outside validation from others or your abuser. To start, we have reflective questions. So this is going to be a little casual. I do have my notebook because this is going to feel like a FaceTime. We're going to go over some reflective questions to see, are you in an abusive relationship? I'm going to refer as the abuser as they or them. This can be a friend, family member, ex, partner, boss, etc. Do they use pressure tactics against you? This includes but not limited to withholding money, affection, important information, or using guilt to make you change your mind, opinions, and alter your own reality. Withholding personal belongings or access to friends or family. Our next reflective question. Have you tried to communicate with the abuser about their behavior? Do they belittle you, try to alter your reality, change your mind, or twist your words? Does the abuser blame you for their actions as a result of a consequence against you? Does the abuser leave you questioning your reality on something that was before confronted to them clear to you? For example, they gaslight you into believing something happens for a different reason than you originally thought. Do you question yourself if you were too oversensitive or overreacting because they minimize the big things that feel big to you? Do they act in behaviors that put you down, accuse you, humiliate you, or insult you constantly or consistently? Do they put down your feelings by disrespecting your emotions, feelings, opinions, excitement, your looks, and etc.? Though there are many layers and forms of abuse, the onion as I'm going to call it, we will go through the 7 layers of abuse. Starting with the most, I'd say, known is physical abuse, which is intentional bodily injury. Second, we have sexual abuse. Now this is sexual content or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of the victim. Psychological abuse is characterized by a person subjecting or exposing another person to behavior that may result in psychological trauma, including anxiety, chronic depression, and PTSD. Fourth, we have verbal abuse, which is a range of words or behaviors used to intimidate, manipulate, and maintain power or control over the victim. 5 and 6 are emotional and mental abuse. This is non-physical behaviors that are meant to control, isolate, and frighten the victim. 7 is financial. When one person has access to the other's economic resources and diminishes the victim's capacity to support themselves financially and economically. A great way to acknowledge and accept forms of abuse is finding the patterns. Now we will review micro and macro patterns of abuse. Now we're going to talk about micro patterns. These are frequent patterns of abuse. These could be as often as daily or slightly less frequent as a weekly basis. These forms of abuse usually go right over your head or fly under the radar, because this form of abuse often is covert behavior, meaning not directly observable by the victim or others around us. Examples of covert abuse and micro patterns are continuous rude comments to put the victim down, criticize against them, and disrespect to the victim. The abuser will put you down at times where appreciation would normally be given. The abuser will invalidate your views and emotions. Micro patterns invalidate emotions and lower your self-esteem. Micro patterns of abuse can lead to warping the victim's reality by manipulation, blaming, minimizing, gaslighting, and more. Victims of this may be told it's all in your head. You may feel like you can never do anything right or you're naturally a bad person with these consistent patterns of abuse, leading to a dangerous mindset if you are constantly felt like you are in the wrong. Macro patterns. Macro patterns are consistent in their detriment or cause of harm. These are less frequent patterns of abuse by giving against the victim at a larger scale. The less frequently usually result in intensifying belittling, neglect, and other layers of abuse. Macro abuse is a pattern of punishment directed at the victim. An example of verbal abuse with under macro patterns is yelling, swearing, and verbal intimidation. Macro patterns involve creating dysfunction around social occasions for the victim, including their or others' birthdays, holidays, and other celebrations. This abuse technique is used to keep the victim's self-esteem low and create a chaos only the abuser can control. This may look like the abuser creating huge fights before celebrations, events, dates, or other important life events, usually for the victim. Now, after cutting into the layers of the onion, let's discuss why we can't leave or haven't been able to leave the abuser. The intent of abuse is to force you into an environment where you have to stay. There are their own layers to the onion when it comes to leaving the abuser. Control, confusion, dependency, punishment, and fear. An abuser will cut any escape route you could create to leave. Their goal or purpose of abuse is with intent to keep you under their terms, and it cannot end without it being under the terms of the abuser. The abuser will leave you with an imbalance of power. An abuser may aim to isolate you with fear, manipulation, gaslighting, and making you lose connection with others, like family and friends. Feeling of shame or guilt from lack of communication with others leaves a lack of possibility for support recognizing the abuse or leaving the abuser. A large factor in why victims don't or can't leave their abusers outside their abusive behavior is who they are to the victim. A family member, partner, friend, ex, lover, boss, or other significant relationship. Mental fog can be created within the confusion with identifying the abuse from the abuser. Some important things to remember if you have experienced abuse or in an abusive relationship or have ever felt you have been abused. Some reflection words that I would like you to tell yourself are: the abuse was not your fault, and it can't be. You deserve better than your abuse and your abuser. You are there for yourself, always and forever. I were and are enough. And if you or anyone you know needs help, help is available. And over here and in the description, I will leave helplines. We have National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is called 800-799-7233, or text START in all caps to 88788. Safe Horizon Hotline is 1-800-621-HOPE 4673. Rape or Sexual Assault Hotline is 1212-227-3000. And an All Crimes Hotline is 1-866-689-HELP 4357. And I will see you guys in the next episode where hopefully we talk about something a little bit more lighthearted. And you can find me on Instagram. This podcast, if you're watching it, is on YouTube, and I will have the Spotify link next to me and in the description. And if you are listening on Spotify, well, you can always find the video on YouTube, or you can find me on Instagram at Girlyhub Podcast. All my links are the same, and I hope to see you guys next time, and I hope you learned something, and I hope anybody who needed to hear this today, I hope it sticks with you well. Bye! Mental and emotional abuse, which is non-physical behaviors that are meant to control, isolate, or threaten. Emotional and